Welcome to the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, I'm Fawn Germer.
And I'm Michelle Brigman.
And this is the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast. Our guest today is author Susan Reynolds. You have no idea how wonderful it is to say author Susan Reynolds, because Susan is one of my clients that I have a side business where I help people to write their books. And how many years have we been at it?
I think 5 or 6.
Yeah. And now, this is why I needed my scissors. It just got here. And I purposely was not going to open this. Michelle, one day you're going to understand how cool this is to see people opening your books. And I feel so invested in this book because it's such a personal look at what this wonderful woman went through when her son was born with medical issues that tested everything she had within her. And it's a battle that, ultimately she didn't win, but boy, did she learn. And so now I'm just going to pull this out. Can't wait to see it.
This is so exciting.
Look at that beautiful book. People, if you are not watching on YouTube, let me tell you. So I've got the hardcover version and it better be, it is signed. Oh, yeah. Oh, that is such a great inscription. So here's this beautiful book, got a gorgeous cover of a mother's hands around a baby's feet creating a heart. And it's called While I Breathe. Again, While I Breathe by Susan M. Reynolds, which you can get all over Amazon. And you should, because if you are a mother or anyone who loves children, humanity, and growth, it's all of that in one place. And Michelle, you've been hearing about this for a long time. And so, Susan, I'm so proud of you. Thanks for coming on the podcast. And if you would tell our listeners a little, or our viewers also, a little about the story. So for background.
Sure, of course. And first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I so appreciate it. While I Breathe is the story of my son, Ryan's life. He was born prematurely with a heart defect and Down syndrome, and fought like hell from that moment on through many ups and downs, medical illnesses, setbacks, challenges. He just fought his little heart out to survive. And through all of that, he became an inspiration to not clearly to me, but to all of our family, friends, the medical personnel, anyone that really got to meet him and experience his life. What wound up happening is he stopped growing in utero when I was 28 weeks pregnant, but we did not know that. The doctor didn't know it and I didn't know it. And then 4 weeks later, I hadn't felt him moving. Went in. We wound up doing an emergency C-section. I was alone in that moment, so I did this by myself. It was way before cell phones, so I could not locate anybody to be with me, including my husband. And that just began a stretch of, immense sadness, frustration. Just the greatest. I had to dig down so deep to figure out what I was made of to get myself through, especially those first few days. And then the more I learned, the more I was subjected and exposed to all of the different equipment and the whole NICU environment and then all of the noises, the sounds, the people that it just every day became a little bit of a little tiny step forward. And we went from Ryan almost dying that first night, the second night, the third night, to, slowly stepping up to the next level. Sadly, to then be just pushed down again, but he kept getting back up, and we were just kind of like, it just was a kind of an exploration of how to deal with the adversity of medical institutions, medical professionals. I didn't realize how much I would have to fight for my child. I didn't realize how alone I would feel in doing so. But at the end of the day, the book is basically an exploration of the love for a child, how the family interacts, the different dynamics between family members, different people's strengths, not just mine, but Ryan's father at the time, and how to just pull yourself up and get out of bed and go do what you have to do to be with and to protect and to save your child. And that's kind of a little bit of a summary.
Yeah, and what a beautiful little boy. Can you see that, Michelle? There's little Ryan.
Smile. That smile is so sweet.
And
he's magnificent. Yes.
So why don't you tell them, when did this happen and how old was he when we lost him?
Okay. So I was 32 weeks. Sorry, I was 32 weeks. I was 32 years old when I was pregnant with Ryan. So there was no need, no thought of doing prenatal testing. Quite frankly, it wouldn't have changed the outcome, but we would have been prepared more. So I was 32 weeks pregnant. This was in 1994. Ryan was born in August. He was due in October. So we went through 27 months of being on a ventilator. He was intubated. Honestly, so many times, I don't think I can count them, but he was hospitalized about 75% of his life, home for the other 25%. So he fought for 27 months until his little body just had nothing left to give.
And you had to make tough decisions with that. A hard part of the story comes really, when you're going to go in there for that emergency C-section and you can't find your husband. And that's kind of a recurring theme. And I did want to talk about that because I know when people go through crisis, and maybe not as dramatic as Ryan's story, but it really tests a relationship. So what happened there?
Well, so I think what happened, Ryan's dad and I had an incredibly deep love, truly, and a very strong relationship. And that first night when I found myself alone on this table, looking up at a ceiling, knowing there's, medical personnel all around me trying to get this baby out of me and save his life. And I didn't even think twice about it if I was having any problems myself. He was just, we couldn't find him. I called everybody, and like I said, it was before cell phones, so there was no way. I didn't know where he was, but we're talking 10 o'clock at night. So, it really hurt me and it saddened me. And when he finally did show up, I was grateful. I was as grateful and relieved as I was angry. And, I don't even know. I think I asked him where he was, but I don't remember what he said. And that kind of created the theme for the next 27 months. He was and is a very hard worker, and work came first. Work was always first. So throughout every medical emergency, I was alone dealing with it. If I was called, if Ryan was, really, really breathing hard, and he knew that I had to take, I would say, I have to take Ryan to the hospital. I need to call an ambulance, whatever. He'd say, okay, let me know how it goes. And he'd be out the door. And that was a consistent. So it was really all on my shoulders, which made it very hard for me. At the same time, it made me appreciate my ability and my strength to handle these situations. I never would have thought that I could. And it also created a bond between me and Ryan. He knew I was there for him no matter what. And I I depended on myself. So after that length of time, and a lot of other things went on during this time, but the thing I think that really broke me the most was toward the end. And I don't know how much I should be divulging, but when I did not want to continue Ryan's treatment, he had suffered so traumatically, so horribly, and that was probably the first time that Ryan's dad decided to have a strong opinion about his care. Before that, he depended on me for everything, every bit of knowledge, every action taken. I had to basically become a nurse when Ryan was home. I had to know how to do all these things that a mother should never have to do. But he depended on me for that. And I allowed him to depend on me for that. So I kind of felt like I was the one who should have the voice. And it did create quite a divide between us when Ryan's dad and I disagreed about treatment, end-of-life treatment. And I didn't feel like there's a part in the book where I say it's kind of like a juror on a trial, coming up with an innocent or guilty verdict without ever having been present at the trial. And I think that, that's really what happened. I mean, first of all, I was really hurt. I felt alone, abandoned. There was a lot of anger, a lot of resentment. And yeah.
So, Michelle, you've had 2 children. I just can't even imagine what it would be like after all of your hopes and dreams and prayers for a healthy baby to quickly find out that that's not what you've got.
No, I was just sitting here trying to, never do it justice, but just trying to put myself in that scenario. I know as an example, I had an emergency C-section, but not for, ultimately my baby she was breech, but that whole process is scary. And, you don't, and then I wasn't having a life-threatening situation, but I remember my feelings were that fear and, again, being alone and unclear about what's going to happen. And just, it was terrifying to me. And this someone who, you have this sense of control, and all of a sudden you're in this place where you are helpless. And for you, Susan, your whole journey then was in a place of helplessness. So how do you come to grips with that? Because that's a long time. And it didn't end at 27 months or 28, 27 months. It still goes on, but how do you...
Wait, weeks. I think 28 months would be a long pregnancy.
No, 27 months. I'm talking about, it was a state of...
until he passed?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right. I'm sorry.
Not being in control. How do you deal with that situation?
I wish I had that answer, honestly, but I just did. I prayed a lot. I will say that, but at the time, I don't know. I didn't really know a lot about what to, how to do any of this. I'll be honest. I was completely clueless about all of it. And I just knew that this little boy needed me. And it was so out of my control. And I remember, when he was ready to leave the NICU, and the doctor was wanting him to go to a step-down children's hospital. And I was like, no, I'm pretty sure I can handle it myself. I think I could do this, but they talked me into doing that. And at the end of that stay, that had been 16 weeks then before he finally came home. And I just remember needing so desperately to have control over my life. Like, I needed to be in my home where I could change my child's diaper and cuddle him and hold him and not have eyes all over me all the time. So that was that impact of it. And I thought that was it. And I thought, yay, we're finally home. But 3 days later, it was the same thing. So as time passed, and as these hospitalizations were becoming more and more frequent because then subsequently he developed a lung disease due to, sadly, an error that had been made in the NICU. And this lung disease is what ultimately led to his death over time. Not the heart defect, not the Down syndrome, but it was this lung disease that he developed. So every hospitalization forced me to kind of come to terms with the fact that I don't have control. In fact, I had such little control. The only thing I could control was being next to him by his bedside, rubbing his, massaging his little body, or reading him a story, or playing him music, or if he was awake, if he was not intubated, we would play a little bit. So the only thing I could control was my response to him. And I kind of had to learn to let it go, but that was not easy at all because, yeah.
I think one of the things that continually shocked me about his story was that often the medical establishment was the enemy. And we have to always be mindful of that, whether the person who's in need of health care is a parent or ourselves or our baby, because the things they did to take charge and undermine and just this book is shocking in many ways.
It is shocking. Like I said, there's so many twists and turns that you're like, what on earth is happening? And I remember being right in the middle of it. What I had to learn, one of the most difficult things I learned, is that doctors and medical institutions could care more about their bottom line and more about their liability than they did a child and a child's well-being. And that's what wound up happening halfway through Ryan's life. It was probably the most traumatic event I've ever experienced, when I knew, and deep in my heart, I knew how much I loved my child. I knew how much I wanted to protect him. But just like when Ryan was in the NICU and the doctor made a mistake, I was too raw, too new. I was too much of a newbie to even know what to do with that. But this next time, like almost a year later, when something happened in the pediatric intensive care unit due to the complacency of the pediatric intensivist, Ryan almost died at home because he discharged him and he shouldn't have. And he admitted that, but that became a legal battle. Like, not a legal battle, I'm sorry. That became a human battle, because they then became afraid to let Ryan ever leave that hospital. And so I don't want to say we were held hostage, because that's a strong word these days, but we kind of were. They wouldn't let us leave. They wouldn't let me sign him out against medical advice. And they tried to take control of his life and my life and our family's life. But by the grace of God, I swear, and the help of friends and other doctors in the community willing to take on Ryan's case, it was a 3-month battle where I thought I was going to lose my son to a medical system when I did nothing wrong. And they were so afraid of a liability. They were so afraid, more afraid of that than they were about keeping a child, especially a special needs child, with his mother, with his family. Yeah, it's a crazy story. It's a crazy story.
Yeah. And then toward end of life, you had to fight as his advocate, not only against the hospital and these ethicists, but your husband, to do what this poor baby deserved. Can you tell that story? And then Michelle asks questions.
I can. And that was brutal. That was just brutal. But because I had been with Ryan every second of every day since he was born, I knew him. I knew his sounds. I knew his smiles. I knew his cries, like every mother does, right? You know your child's what your child needs most of the time. Ryan was no different, except that he wasn't like every other child. He had so many limitations because of his illnesses and his constant illnesses and constant limitations. Constant hospitalizations, that I knew when he was strong and when he wasn't. So I knew when he needed to rest. I knew, bottom line, he, toward the end of his life, after every single illness, every time that little boy was intubated, he always could come off the vent. We were always able to get him off that ventilator until we weren't. And that was a shock to all of us. After we got Ryan out of that horrible hospital that tried to send him away to an institution out of state. Sorry, I skipped over that part. What incredible medical care at another local hospital. And I mean that sincerely, truly wonderful medical care. They just had a different belief and what should happen in Ryan's care. Because I knew how much he had already suffered, and this did not come easy for me. He had suffered so greatly. It was when I saw him not be him anymore. He was no longer him. That's when I knew that this was no longer what he would want and what he needed. They say that moms, you should always listen to your maternal instinct. And that's exactly what I was doing. When Ryan became ventilator dependent, the only option, according to the medical community, the institution, the doctors, was to trach him, do a tracheotomy. And I didn't want that for my child, because first, number one, and you can ask me how I knew this. I don't really have a clear-cut answer, but I just knew in my heart, number one, he wouldn't want it. It would make him very unhappy, and it wasn't going to work. I thought it was going to
tell people what that meant physically was going to happen to him.
Sure. Sorry. So he was breathing with a tube down his throat, and we couldn't get him what's called extubation. Couldn't get him extubated. He could not breathe on his own without the ventilator assisting him. Because of that, there were three options. It was either take him off the ventilator, at which point he would die. Leave him on the ventilator with the tube down his throat permanently, or for the foreseeable future, at which point it was just going to cause him suffering, continuous suffering, or do the tracheotomy, which is putting a hole in your throat and putting the tube in that way, and so still having the ventilator breathe for you. You're still on life support. Ryan had various tubes in his body for various medical purposes, and every time he did, he got an infection, and it would go into his body. So he would have to fight another infection. He always made it through it. But this time I really did believe with all my heart that it wasn't going to be good for him, and it would only cause prolonged suffering. The doctors and nurses, they trusted me. They trusted everything that I was saying. But the doctor's viewpoint was, as long as he has a functioning brain, and there's still a very slim chance that Ryan could outgrow this disease, then it's worth a try. And I got that. I get it. I just knew it wasn't going to work. So my husband at the time said that he wanted to do the trach. So we pulled in a bioethicist was called in to hear our case. And sadly, I learned that unless we both agreed to end life-sustaining treatment, then they had no choice but to do the trach. So I was, once again, my power was gone. I had to defer to the power of the hospital as well as my husband.
And this bioethicist had never even gone in and met Ryan.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Fawn, that was the first bioethicist.
Oh, okay.
That was the first one. So then they called in a second one. Yes, you are correct. The second one was called in when my husband and I could not agree. And that's the one he was an older gentleman, an older physician, and he had not gone to see Ryan. He didn't care. He was a busy man. And he just said, as far as I'm concerned, he compared it to a case that he had been involved with of a young boy who was in a car accident, who was on a ventilator, and they had to trach him. But the boy was able to get himself off, and he's now living a full and functioning life. And that's fantastic. That was great news, but that wasn't Ryan. And I knew that. And he couldn't differentiate the two cases. So yes, he's the one that ultimately forced the hand and forced us to do this. But my husband and I were at odds. And I think, I don't know if I was ever able to forgive him for that one, but.
I was curious in all of this, considering the time, right? People had a very different perception of Downs and special needs. And it was, we were still a little bit in the dark ages of kind of keep it hidden. And it's not an equal person. Like what was going on there? And do you think any of that had anything to do with this sort of attitude of,
I wondered that at the time. In fact, I went so far as to ask, my son's issues were his lungs. So I was like, well, let's get a lung transfer. Can he go on a transfer list, right? A transplant list. And they said no. They said he wouldn't be allowed because he has Down syndrome. And I pray to God that's changed now. I have not looked into that. But I do believe that one of the reasons that first hospital was trying to just take control of him, and they wanted to move him, as I said, to an institution out of state that I had gone to visit. My husband and I did our due diligence and went down there to see, would he be better here? I don't know. Would they save him? I wasn't sure. So we went, and it was not pretty. It was a very sad environment, and that's not how I wanted my child living. But I do question if Ryan had not had Down syndrome, would they have acted the way they did? I can't answer that, but
no, it just is curious. I think about that now because I think about people who are in a situation today, and what do are you faced with these same scenarios, but how do you stand up and advocate for your own care or that of, your loved ones, right? Without just assuming that you have to give up your power to the doctors. Like, how do you do that? What advice would you give in terms of advocating?
Oh my gosh. First of all, always listen to your gut instinct. You want to, as a new mother, it's very easy to look at these medical professionals and say they must know what they're talking about. Of course they know what they're talking about. I'm new to this, so I don't know. So I have to, agree with them or at least understand them or give it a chance. I would always say, do your research and listen to that maternal instinct and stand strong and don't let them intimidate you. I allowed that. I take full accountability for some of the weaknesses that I displayed because I did allow them to intimidate me and to, but
I don't see a lot of weakness in this book.
I'm just saying that I know that I allowed them to intimidate me. I tried to fight.
How you felt versus what you did, right? Like, in spite of the intimidation, it sounds like the book talks about how you found your grounding and power and strength.
But imagine this. Here's the one complicating detail that we have not yet talked about, is that at the end, she was pregnant. And she gave birth to Ryan's brother how many days before?
So I gave birth to Christian, Ryan's brother, on September 3rd. Ryan had just turned 2 on August 24th, and then Ryan died in November. So Ryan was alive for a couple of months. So my second son, Christian, was 2 months old when Ryan passed. And that was a whole nother complicated, very emotionally complicated experience. I mean, to this day, when I found out I was pregnant, I had a hard time getting pregnant, and all of a sudden I'm just pregnant. While Ryan was critically ill in the hospital with the flu on life support, somehow I got pregnant. God knows how, but it happened.
I have a pretty good idea.
God knows how.
Sorry, I do know how, but the fact that it happened. So yeah, I mean, and that the whole 9 months of the pregnancy was insane. It was I was in and out of ambulances and in and out of hospitals and emergency rooms and holding his hand while he was on life support. And I had not one complication in my pregnancy, which to me, you know, I think I was meant to have this child, the second child. But it was hard and Fawn knows the story, when I was giving birth to Christian, I had a scheduled C-section, and I went from that's right after they performed the tracheotomy on Ryan, that I was so sad and devastated over, but they did it. I had to accept it. And, you know, so I'm like, okay, maybe it will work. Maybe it will. I don't know. So it was early in the morning of my scheduled C-section, and my husband and we stopped into Ryan's room first. As you know, he was awake, but he was kind of out of it, but he saw me, and I was, you know, just letting him know what I was doing. I was going to go give birth to his baby brother, and I'm so sorry I can't be here with you. And, you know, and I was torn. I didn't want to leave him, but, you know, I was like, it's like a push pull, and I had to go down the hall and have this beautiful, healthy baby, while Ryan was down the hall and around a corner, very close to death. I mean, he wound up living another 2 months after that, but I knew at that point it was, you know, it just, I don't think it was going to happen. It wasn't going to happen.
Susan, how hard was it in that moment or the months later to allow yourself to feel joy with the birth of Christian? Because you've got to be in your own head.
I felt a lot of guilt. I don't even know. I wish I could put myself back in my body back then to see how I did it. But I knew that I had a baby that needed me. I had Ryan, who, I hate to say it this way, but it was kind of true. He no longer needed me because, and I don't mean that the way it sounds, but he was in so much pain at the end. He didn't want to be touched. He didn't want to even be moved. And that made me so sad to know that I could no longer even help him in any way. So that kind of broke me. And then to go home and see this beautiful face, you know, that didn't have tubes all over him attached to him. And I didn't even know how to reconcile that in the beginning. I was like, shouldn't we have a monitor at home for him so we can make sure he's breathing? And they were like, no, it's not necessary. But it was really weird to be able to pick him up freely and just do things with him. So it was like having an out of body experience for a little while. But Christian was just a godsend, truly. When Ryan passed, I was broken because we fought for so long, and he really was just such a beautiful, sweet little boy who deserved so much better. I to this day hope he experienced enough happiness where that he could remember the happiness and not just the pain. But
how many people spend every minute of their life wrapped in unconditional love?
How many people?
Yeah, not many. And that's all that Ryan had, and it's all he gave.
Yeah.
I wrote down on that kind of similar font. What I wrote down is I said, love is enough. And sometimes that's all that you have.
Yeah, right.
It's true.
And
Yeah.
that's what you had there.
It's
Thank you. That's really what I could give him. And that's what I gave him. So I yeah.
So why did you decide you were going to write about it? And what was that process like?
It's funny. When we were going through this way back when, because of all the different experiences, the nurses especially said to me, "My God, you could write a book." And I was like, yeah. And clearly it's been years, 20 years after Ryan passed that I finally was able to start this process. And I I came across, coincidentally, like a stack of notes that I had written 20 years earlier, like when Ryan was alive and shortly after he died, that gave me so much information and background and experiences and facts. And so I kind of, started Fawn as the story. I had a reading with a spiritual medium who
was a guest on Hard Won Wisdom. We should know that.
I was wondering if that's who it was.
It's Rebecca Rosen. People,
Rebecca
if you
Rosen.
missed
Amazing.
I had a reading with Rebecca who truly did change my life because it was the first time I was connected to my son. And there was no mistaking that Ryan was there because there was nothing on the internet about Ryan, nothing at all. There was no way she could have known anything that she told me, I won't go into those details, but it was completely life-changing for me. And at the end of the reading, she said, Ryan wants you to write. And that's when I knew I needed to start writing a story. And maybe that's not what he wanted me to write. I'm not sure, but that's what I wrote.
Oh, the thing about it, you don't have the training, the background, and immediately I knew she's a good writer. And we worked so long on it. It's like you're, a close friend. We've never even met in person.
Never met Fawn, and I love her so much.
Love people who love me.
She was kind enough, literally, to take a phone call from a stranger. She opened her ears and her heart to me over time, and she really, and she knows, this, Fawn. I believe this book would not have possibly come to fruition without her. So
that's the kind of person. I mean, honestly, that's the kind of person Fawn is. So,
thank you. Well, of all my coaching clients, and there've been a lot over the years, this one, honestly, when I opened that box, it felt as good as when I opened the box for my last book.
Really?
That I wrote, okay?
Robin, you wrote it.
Yeah. And just it's such a beautiful story about love and sacrifice. And, and the ultimate sacrifice that a mother makes when she says, you have to go be free, I know.
Yeah. That was not easy. In that moment for me to be able to say no to saving him. But that goes against everything mothers do. Or does it? Because actually, I don't know. Sometimes it is the right thing to do, but it's hard, complicated.
So if you get to the other side and he's there and he's verbal and you could have a conversation, what would you ask him and what would you say?
I would ask him if he had a horrible life, how much pain he remembers. Does he know how much I loved him? Does he know how hard I tried to save him? Does he know his brother and sister who are here on earth now? I just want to know if he's happy, but I know he is. See, I know he's happy. I know he's safe. I know he's loved, and I know he's bopping around this earth, giving me signs all the time, which is awesome.
Susan, there are a lot of people that are dealing with, maybe a similar situation with loss and grief, particularly that comes with the child. How do you give yourself permission to find joy again?
Oh, that takes time. That takes a lot of time. I always hated the expression time heals, and I heard it a lot. And maybe I even believed in it at the time. I don't know, but I have since learned time doesn't heal. It does not heal, but it helps. It helps a lot. And you do just getting through each day, each moment, each day, each week, having different encounters with people, different experiences. You can, at least for me, I don't want to say you, but I came to understand, for example, when I would see somebody in public, just behaving, I don't know, irrationally or whatever it might be, I'd be like, you don't know what's going on in their world. You have no idea what might have just happened. And so it just allowed me to open myself up to having a better understanding of not just myself, but other people. And what I found is that one day I was able to smile and feel good and not feel guilty. I was able to laugh, and it was a genuine laugh. But I will say, having a baby to raise who brought so much joy, and he was the easiest of children. And that saved me.
Yeah.
That saved me. So, but it's not, time doesn't heal. Time helps. And you got to get through. Hopefully you have the love and support of family, friends. You got, people to go to. You've got good grief counseling, therapists, whatever it is that you need. But you need all those things.
And a marriage counselor, apparently. So tell what happened after that, though.
Well, so I was always a big believer in therapy for many reasons, since I was, having been raised a certain way. And my husband at the time, he just didn't believe in therapy. He thought my friends should be able to help me. And I was like, if I keep leaning on my friends, I'm not going to have any more friends. So I needed therapy, and he didn't understand it. And I didn't understand his lack of understanding. That's the best way I could say it. He had different expectations of how I should grieve. I didn't have any expectations of him. Well, actually, that's not true. I was shocked at how little he grieved. So maybe I did have expectations. And I was so disappointed in how little he grieved. And then for him to come down hard on me when I was grieving. And I'm not talking about just a week or two later. It took me a long time. I mean,
it takes a long time.
Yeah, years later, the tears will come. It's an ebb and flow, like they say. The waves go in, the waves go out. And that's just exactly how grief is. It ebbs and flows. I remember at Ryan's funeral, this is so wild, but at Ryan's funeral, my husband's secretary, that's what they were called at the time, the secretary pulled me aside and she said, try to keep him home for at least a week. Don't let him come back to work. And I looked at her, I was like, that's out of my control. You know how he is. And he went back to work pretty much like 2 days later, because I think he was uncomfortable with the grief. He was uncomfortable seeing me sad. I don't know what to do with that. I didn't know what to do with that. So
when it's not yours to do, there's nothing you can do. They've got to figure it out. Well, I'm curious about what are some great acts of kindness as a friend to someone who's in your situation dealing with it?
Great question.
What do we do? What do we say? Like,
you ask about that child. Most people are afraid to bring it up, and they do really feel, I don't want to say anything because it'll just remind her. Well, it's never not in our minds ever. And so to talk about him, to ask questions, tell me what he was like. And those are basic things, but even going a little bit further into like, so where are you at? How was your day today? How is it compared? Is it better than yesterday? Where are you at in the grieving process? Do as a friend, do some research yourself, on grief and how to support your friends and loved ones. One friend that I had bought me, I still have it. I still have everything that I had in it from the moment she gave it to me. She bought me a little white box to hold all of Ryan's favorite things, or all of my favorite things for him. I still have it. It's always under my bed or in my nightstand, depending on where I'm living. And I pull things out periodically. And then now they make me smile. Somebody gave me a little compact with, unbeknownst to me at the time, but it was of a butterfly and a Ryan's birthstone. And inside of it, instead of using it as a compact, they had clipped off some of Ryan's hair for me when he passed. And so I put in a little baggie and I carry that in the compact so that he's always with me. The little thing like important, not look, we all love flowers, but the things that keep that loved one with you always is what I think a grieving mother needs. But really the biggest thing is, don't forget that child. Don't ever.
And I think Michelle also was asking, what is something we can do if somebody's going through something like that while maybe still alive? Was that right?
Sorry, Michelle.
Kind of just both. Like, how do you show up for your friend?
Just make time for them. I had one friend who every Wednesday so Ryan at the end of his life was in the hospital for 5 straight months on life support. And I had one person reach out to me who hadn't been a friend, but became a friend because she would not take no for an answer. She every Wednesday, every single Wednesday, she brought me lunch in the ICU every week. So there's things like that. You kind of people don't want to feel like a burden, right? I'm not one who accepts help easily. I was like, no, I'm fine. So it's the people that say, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to bring you food, or I'm going to come give you a hug, or I'm going to, I don't know, nothing tangible is coming to my mind, but it's just knowing somebody's there to reach out a hand and to be present. I guess I would say is don't take no for an answer, and you don't have to sit with them, because if they really don't want company, they don't want company.
Yeah.
But just do what makes you feel good.
Show up.
And you think about what you would want, what would be helpful to you in that moment. That I think makes some sense too.
Did it surprise you who it was that did show up, or were they the characters you expected to rise up?
Oh, everybody that was in my life at that time, they showed up for me. Yeah.
Well, then we got to get them to get out there and support this wonderful book. People, it's called While I Breathe by Susan Reynolds. I am so blessed to have worked with you on this. I wish you every success, and I hope someday I get to meet Ryan myself, because I feel like I know a part of him, and it's all beautiful.
Oh, you definitely will. I know he's with you.
But
now.
That's assuming I get to go up there, right?
Well, Susan, you shine brightly.
Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you so much. This means the world.
Well, thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining the Hard Won Wisdom podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.